Hi there, Jane Gilbert.
Yes, since 2009. Yes, I said hello. I thought I'd come back.
Good.
I was very discouraged.
Why?
Personal reasons.
General stuff, yeah. Yeah. Good, we're glad to have you.
I gave this to somebody that is remember or not, but I know the secretary was with Louis Allen.
Yes, I do remember.
But now, when Henry and Jackson,
That's what I thought. Yeah. And I
but I gave it to some of your people.
Wonderful.
So
Well,
I
we,
thought, they also,
right.
I'm with them, with the Henry and Jackson.
Oh, good. Well, good.
Are you familiar with that?
No, but I will be.
Yes. Henry Jackson Foundation for the Advancement of Military Medicine. We do tremendous amount of research. We are mandated by Congress. And the name Henry and Jackson comes from.
Oh, how interesting.
Yes.
That's fabulous.
We work directly with people who are Dietrich, all kinds of different organizations, research. We do the contract for research for all of these different companies, the grants,
That's wonderful.
this was I believe an acquisition from the U.S. He sent me back.
Good.
Average, didn't mean
Is there?
send you that.
Yeah, I was going to say you got me so flustered that I can't. Okay. Nice to see you.
Yes.
He's our chief of public policy. Yeah, see, I remember better than you think. This isn't on, is it, if I rest this on? But I mean,
You don't need that.
I know, but I'm just saying, I can rest this up against here and it won't block anything or do. You want me to start? Oh, hello. Huh? Okay. If we can get everybody to please take a seat and come in from outside, we'll get started. Ready? Good afternoon. I'm Jane Gilbert, President and CEO of the ALS Association, and I want to welcome all of you here to Washington, D.C. I have said now for, I guess this is actually the fifth time I've said this, this is absolutely the very most favorite part of my job, and that is standing in front of a group of people like this who are all united in a common bond. It's a bond that none of us wishes we were bound by, but it is a bond that brings us together with a mission that is absolutely sterling in its ever-ending desire to cure, at least find the cause for ALS and be able to provide some treatment. And of course, it's so nice to look out across the audience and see faces who are now friends, familiar faces. It always makes me a little sad to see those faces who are not here. And I would ask you all just to take a moment of silence and honor those people who have either lost their lives to ALS this past year or who are not able to join us because of their health. Thank you. You know, we all take an approach to this in a different way, but I can tell you that there's nothing more powerful than what you're going to be doing over the next couple of days here in Washington, D.C. We are the single largest gathering of ALS representatives. We are joined by partners in the fight against the disease, including MDA, ALS TDI. There are a number of other people who are here to join us as well, and you will be hearing and seeing and visiting with them over the next couple of days. So as we unite together and go to Capitol Hill tomorrow, there's nothing that will make a stronger impact or make a greater impression than your stories and the voices that you bring to this cause. Certainly we can have all kinds of awareness, and we've done lots of wonderful things this year, but there's nothing like the awareness that comes from those of you telling your own stories. We need to increase the funding and to advocate for policies that will improve the care for people living with this disease, and to be able to deliver a new treatment from the bench to the bedside as soon as possible. And that's why we're here. I mentioned that it can be challenging, or I will mention that I know it's challenging for people to come to Washington, to make the effort to travel, to get here. And certainly we so appreciate the fact that you make that effort, because truthfully, the people on the Hill who work for us, by the way, will be glad to hear your stories and will be anxious to hear directly from you. I want to welcome all of you who are here to help. In addition, those of you who are not able to join us here in Washington in person, for the first time we're streaming this via Facebook. So all of you out there in cyberland, I don't know how we do it, but we do, and you are able to join and be part of this gathering as well. And I would also encourage all of you who are out there to send emails tomorrow. While we are visiting and walking the halls of the buildings, please send emails to your congressman and let them know that you too are part of this battle. There are more than 100 people who have registered for the conference who are living with ALS, and over the next 3 days there'll be more than 1,000 people who will join us for the programs. That is the single largest gathering of ALS people in the United States. And it's just very exciting. As I said, MDA is here, ALS TDI is here, ALS of Nevada, ALS Treat Us Now. We've got lots of partners, and working together, we will make a difference. We've made a great program has been planned over the next few days, one that includes the latest news and research, clinical trials, educational sessions about the role of the FDA, some exciting breakout sessions that I think you'll find very interesting, and then, of course, training on how to advocate on Capitol Hill tomorrow. So we'll also hold a town hall meeting here in the ballroom from 6 to 7 tomorrow. That's an opportunity for you, any of you who are interested, to come and ask questions directly of me and of Bill Thowett, who is the chairman of the Board of Trustees. And I would encourage you, those of you who have issues or questions that you want answered, to come and take part in that. I have a very thick skin, so you can ask whatever you like, and I will try to give you an honest and a not defensive answer if I can do that. I am very proud of the work we do each and every day, but I know there are questions, and I know people do have comments that they'd like to make. So please join us from 6 to 7 here in the ballroom tomorrow for that town hall meeting. Before I turn this over, and one last thing, the marketplace is open. So tomorrow we have some vendors. You need to go out. You have your little passports that were in your registration packets, and if you go to each vendor and have that stamped, we will draw Friday at 4:30, I believe, for an iPad. So please go around and have your passport stamped, and be sure you make an effort to visit those people in the marketplace so that you can have your name submitted for the winner of the iPad. And if you have that passport stamped at every exhibitor's booth, you'll be eligible to win it. And before I turn the program over to Steve Gibson, who is our Chief of Public Policy, I would like the other members of our national staff to stand and be recognized. There are a number of people in the room. If you would, please stand. I hope they're in the room. They're supposed to be in the room. Take a look around you. Oh, thank you very much. That, by the way, was not meant, although they very much appreciate, and so do I, the applause. It was meant to point them out to you so that if you do have any questions or want to address something with a member of the national staff, you'll know what they look like. So you can go up and grab them and chat with them for a few minutes. So with that, I again want to welcome everybody to Washington. I look forward to visiting with you individually over the next few days. Please, I always say this, but I need to say it, please walk up and reintroduce yourself to me because I'm very good with faces. I'm not always so good with names, although Henry here in the front row will tell you I have a pretty good memory. So please do enjoy yourselves. Take advantage of the time together. Wonderful program tomorrow on the Hill, and then on Friday around all of our educational opportunities. I'll look forward to visiting with you, and with that, I turn it over to Steve Gibson, who is our Chief of Public Policy.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you to all the folks online who are watching us live right now. And for those of you who can't make it, please share with your friends because this will be stored on our Facebook page for future viewings. I know this is a little bit confusing for the half of you who've been here for the last number of years because our schedule has changed. For those of you who are new, you're probably just now learning this schedule. But we did go to a different schedule this year from a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday to a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So the traditional sessions are a little bit out of order for those of you who've been here for a while, so we'll help to clarify. But we're very excited that you're all here. I know many of you have spent a lot of time getting here and a lot of resources getting here, and we really are here all to help you. And that's with everything, whether it's not just learning about these issues, it's not just telling your story. If you have an issue with your wheelchair, if you have an issue with something in your room, let any of us know, let folks know at the front desk, because that's what we're here, is to really be your family away from home. This session is to focus on our government research programs. I know that's a little bit confusing because normally we talk about our priorities before we actually get the in-depth. So in a second, after we have our great presentations, there'll be a chance for you to all ask questions. And if you could focus your questions on what the program actually does and what the future plans of the program. Both of our doctors here are government employees. They are not the ones to tell you how to advocate for the Hill. They're not the ones to talk about political issues like sequestration. That's for us to do, and we'll do that in our next session. So as you hear their presentations, please do write down some questions, especially if you have a question for our CDC colleague. We're also trying to find out what happened to the Braves these last 2 years because they haven't made the playoffs, so I'm sure he'll be happy to answer that. In any way, our first presenter is Dr. Kevin Horton. He is in charge of the surveillance registry at ATSDR, the sister agency of CDC. We, as well as the Muscular Dystrophy Association, have worked closely with him on this registry, and he's here to give us an update.
Thanks, Steve. Good afternoon. Actually, last I heard, the Braves were up over the Nats, three game lead, so yeah, had to get that in there. I'm glad to be here to talk about the National ALS Registry. I know that many of you know about the registry. There's probably some of you in here that don't know a whole lot about the registry, and there's probably some of you in here that don't know anything about the registry. So today I'm going to talk about, give you an overview of the registry, and I'm going to also talk about some of the initiatives that we have going on with the registry that's actually going to strengthen the registry. And I think you'll find that some of these initiatives are actually pretty cool. So like Steve said, ATSDR is a federal agency. We're co-located in Atlanta with the CDC, and we really focus on environmental health issues, specifically as it relates to toxic exposures and occupational diseases. So let me just launch right into my presentation, and I want to make sure that I leave enough time at the end to answer any questions that you might have. So first, let's talk about how the registry came about. The U.S. ALS Registry Act was passed in 2008, and many of you, or some of you in here, were very instrumental in helping ALSA and other groups get this legislation passed. And what it does is it directs ATSDR to establish and maintain the National ALS Registry. And if you actually go and look at the bill that was passed, these are some of the purposes that were listed or are listed on the bill. And it's really to help us learn more about ALS. You know, right now we don't have a good sense of how common is this disease in the U.S. So one of the things that we're trying to do is to describe how many people have the disease in the U.S., what's the incidence rate, what's the prevalence rate. Also, who gets the disease? You know, how does it affect certain subpopulations, African Americans, Caucasians? You know, how does it affect different groups? And then probably the most important thing is what causes the disease. You know, 70 some odd years after Gehrig was diagnosed, progress has been made, but we still don't know exactly why the disease happens. So we hope that some of the stuff that we're doing will shine some light on the potential risk factors. So let me just briefly talk about how one gets into the National ALS Registry. And a common theme here that I'll be talking about is this is a collaboration. This is not a CDC initiative. This is not an ATSDR initiative. This is not an ALSA initiative. Everyone has to be a part of this to make this truly a great registry. And so on the left-hand side, you'll see here, this is our national database approach. So what we're doing is we're using several large existing databases, government databases, and specifically these are Medicare, Medicaid, and the Veterans Health Administration database and the Veterans Benefit Administration database. And by our estimates, that represents upwards of 90 million people in the U.S. So big deal. What does that mean, right? Well, we've done some pilot work a couple years back, and we've developed some algorithms that we can use to apply to these databases to help us tease out who actually has the disease, who maybe has the disease, we're not sure, and then who clearly does not have the disease. So part of this algorithm, there are a number of different things that go into it. I won't really get into the weeds, but ICD code is kind of a diagnostic code that physicians use to code for medical purposes. So obviously this is one of the ingredients that go into this algorithm, if you will. But we know that miscoding happens all the time. So we can't just strictly rely upon an ICD code. Other things that we look at is Realitech use. We know that Realitech's the only FDA-approved drug at this point, and that's probably a pretty telltale sign if someone's taking Realitech that they have the disease. Now, of course, we know that there are patients out here that don't use Realitech. So, again, we can't just rely on one specific thing to help us figure out who's got the disease and who doesn't. And then we look at other things like frequency of visits to the neurologist. You know, is it a one and done thing, or do they go frequently over time to clinics? And if so, that's a pretty good indication that something is probably neurologically happening with that person. So these are just some of the ingredients of this algorithm. So once we apply the algorithm, as I mentioned, it'll separate patients into those that we feel that are clearly not patients. Obviously, those people will not go into the registry. You can see the middle box here, potential cases. This just means we don't have enough information one way or the other to make a determination whether this person is an ALS case or not. For those people, we push them aside until we get subsequent data in hopes that will help us make a determination to either put them in a true category or not a true case category. And then obviously those people who meet our case definition will go directly into the registry. So this is one approach, and a patient doesn't have to do anything with this approach. But what we found out through our pilot work is we're not going to be able to identify every single person with ALS in these databases. So for example, if you're not in the military, you're not going to show up in the VA databases. And so for that reason, we thought, let's come up with a kind of a safety net. How do we capture those people that may not be in any of these databases? So what we've done, and this is probably what most of you know about, is created the National Online Registry, which is the actual self-enrollment part of the registry. So for those of you who are not familiar with this, you come in to the website and you enter a series of validation questions. And these are the same validation questions that the VA used back in the mid-2000s, and we know it has a high predictive rate in terms of determining who actually has ALS. And so we thought, why reinvent the wheel? If it worked for them, let's take it, modify it, and use it for our purposes. And again, it does the same thing. It identifies people that are true cases and those that are not cases. Those who are true cases, we ask them to not only enroll, but to take the risk factor surveys. And this is part of the message that I want to make sure that people understand today. You know, it's great and it's awesome if people can come and enroll, but we need patients to take that extra step and take the time to complete these brief risk factor surveys. And again, you do this online. Each one is approximately 5 minutes. Some are longer than others, but this gets back to determining the risk factors for ALS. If enough people answer these risk factor modules, the better our data will be. And hopefully that will help us uncover maybe a common theme that we're seeing out there, whether it's with the military or some kind of occupational exposure. But the point is, the more people who come and take the time to take these surveys, the better the data are going to be. So let me just briefly discuss, for those of you who are not familiar with the registry, the current risk factor surveys that we have are listed up on the screen. And these are ones that are identified in the literature as being associated with ALS or potentially having an association with ALS. And so we thought, let's start with these. Of course, many of you are probably aware of the Military Association. So we thought, let's dig into this deeper. Lifetime occupational history, smoking, drinking. Again, these are things that we really want to find out more about. Is there an association? The last one is the disease progression, or the ALS FRS module. The first 6 modules up here you take one time. Once you take it once, you're done. This last one up here is more of a longitudinal survey. So we want to know the disease progression over time. And this is really kind of powerful data, and it helps us show the progression of this disease. We all know it's very swift, but this will help in terms of science. It'll help show legislators hey, this is a very serious disease. So a number of different reasons, but we really need patients to take these. So joining the registry is quick and easy. I don't know if you've been to our website lately, but based on feedback that we've gotten from patients and stakeholders, we tried to streamline the website, make it a little bit more user-friendly. So this is the way it looks now. Joining the registry, it's pretty intuitive, point and click, fill out boxes with your name and address and things like that. Other places it has drop-down menus, yes, no, and things of that nature. So, but let me just make sure people understand this too. Once you register, please put that password in a safe place so you know where it is. We get a lot of calls from people, and it's understandable. And I'll discuss the whole password issue a little later, because I know that there are issues with having to reset your password, and we're very aware of the way patients and people feel about this, but I'll address that separately. But just make sure you put this aside and you know what your password is. Of course, if you forget it, you can call us, and we're happy to reset it. But we could save a lot of time by just making sure you know what your password is. Getting back to the surveys, this is what the survey page looks like. Again, it's point and click on survey 1. You'll have some questions that come up. Answer the questions, and once you're done, again, it's just a one-time deal. And then again, at the bottom, you have your disease progression. So let me shift gears here and talk about some of the current initiatives that we have ongoing with the registry. And I really think that some of these are very exciting, and I think that you'll find some of these are very exciting. I'm going to go through each one, describe it, and then give you the latest and greatest on where we are with each one. The first one is clinical trials and research opportunities. How many of you in here want to know more about ALS research, clinical trials? Okay, so this is what we hear loud and clear. Now, there are sites out there, clinicaltrials.gov, where you can go. You can find out, what clinical trials. It takes a bit of maneuvering, and you have to know how to operate the system. What we're talking about here is once you enroll, you'll be delivered an email directly to you saying, based on your demographics, you might be a candidate for this X, Y, and Z clinical trial or epi study. So we're trying to deliver it directly to the patient, as opposed to the patients having to go out and look on other sites to find out, yes, maybe I'm eligible for this one, or no, maybe I'm not. So what it does is it links patients with researchers directly. As I mentioned, the notifications will come directly to you in an email. But in order for this to work, our pals have to sign up for it. They have to enroll in the registry. And then we really need researchers to come in and submit proposals. And I'll give you examples of how this is working and what proposals we've accepted so far. But let me just step you through this. I think it's kind of important to know how this part works. So obviously a person comes, enrolls in the registry. During the registration process, you have to check a little box saying, yes, I'm interested in hearing more about clinical trials or epi studies or new research. Once you do that, then the patient, you're done. Okay, you're done on your side. At that point, or concurrently, we have researchers coming in and submitting proposals online to us via our web portal. And we're trying to make it as easy and streamlined as possible for researchers. We'll review this proposal internally, and depending on if it's approved, depending on what the study is, ATSDR will query the system. So let's say that a researcher wants all males from Georgia who have ALS. We can query the system and send emails to all males in Georgia or all females in Montana who are in the military. We can kind of slice and dice and target those particular people and send them emails. Once a person gets the email, it's up to them to make contact to the researcher. So in the email, it'll have the recruitment material. It'll tell you what the study is or what the clinical trial is. It'll give you contact information of that principal investigator. But it's up to the PALs to contact this person. So ATSDR is kind of serving as the middleman. We don't have anything necessarily to do with these clinical trials or epi studies, but we're trying our best right now to link patients with researchers. This is how the registry is currently being used right this minute. And to give you some examples, we've received 3 proposals to date. We've approved all 3 of them, and thousands of people have already been notified that they're eligible for these particular studies that are listed up here. So again, we really want more PALs and more researchers to come in and take advantage of this system. I think it's a tremendous benefit. It not only helps patients, but we're trying to reach out to pharmaceutical companies, to start a registry of your own to test a drug or a device or something costs money. Why not use what CDC ATSDR has already built and take advantage of that? So we're trying to market it far and wide, and we're very excited about this. New risk factor surveys. We've heard loud and clear from our pals that we're not asking enough questions. We totally agree. So we are very close to releasing some new risk factor surveys, and I'll talk about where we are in the release process. But you can see these are the risk factors that will be coming out. The last one in particular I think is important because it's an open-ended question, and it essentially asks pals, what do you think contributed to your ALS, or what do you think contributes to ALS in general? And it gives a person a chance to really talk about what they think led to their disease. And we think this is very important for scientists to hear directly from pals. So we're excited about this as well. So where are we in this process? Surveys have already been developed. These were created by Stanford University. They're currently being programmed into our test server right now. But before we can actually pull the trigger on this, we have to get approvals. And some of you have probably heard me mention Office of Management and Budget, OMB. This is another process in the approval process that we have to get approval from OMB before we can launch these surveys. We submitted the package already, and we're supposed to hear by July 31st. And so if we hear by July 31st, we're going to start rolling these things out soon afterwards. And our hope is to get them out in a staggered approach throughout the rest of the year. So again, trying to get more risk factor surveys out there. We want to know a lot about PALs and their experience. And I think having these risk factor surveys are critical in looking at ALS. Biorepository. How many PALs or caregivers, how many out here have taken part in any kind of biorepository? Have you submitted samples, blood samples, maybe tissue? Okay, so a few. We know that there are other biorepositories out there that focus specifically on ALS, and we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here, but we do want to make sure that any person who is associated with the National ALS Registry is able to give a biosample if they want to. Now, right now, we're in a pilot phase testing this out. How is this going to work? But I think the critical thing is if this goes to fruition and we launch a full-scale biorepository, This would be head and shoulders above a lot of biorepositories because we're already collecting the epidemiologic data to go along with these samples. So in other biorepositories, you may have blood, you may have tissue, but you may not know a lot about who that came from, what their occupation was, were they in the military, did they have concussions, and we'll have that information to go along with these biological specimens. And so the feasibility study is simply, we've developed a protocol. This was done internally with ATSDR CDC scientists and external scientists as well. And we're doing a subsequent specimen collection to make sure that this is going to work the way we think it will. The protocol has been developed. It's been IRB approved, which IRB, Institutional Review Board, another hurdle, but this has been approved. And you can see here, these are the biospecimens that are being proposed to be collected. And we're going to do this two different ways. We're going to do an in-home collection, and this is going to be more of a longitudinal pilot. We're going to collect samples, 2 different time periods, blood, urine, nails, hair, saliva. We're also going to do a post-mortem collection. And you can see the biospecimens listed up here for post-mortem collection. Now, where are we at with this? We've started recruiting people already. So ATSDR sent out emails to people asking them, if you're interested in being a part of this pilot, please respond. And there'll be a follow-up email coming out. You'll get all kind of information, probably more information than you want to know, but we just want to make sure that patients are aware of this opportunity. And we hope to begin in-home specimen collection later this month. So if you get an email or if you get a mailing from ATSDR and you're interested, I would encourage you to follow up with the directions on how to respond back. If you're not interested, certainly understand that's fine too. And here's a number that you can call if you're interested in this. At this point, what we're doing, since this is a pilot, we're taking a sample of specimens from people. So in other words, we're not taking samples from everyone enrolled in the registry right now. We have to just test this out. And so not everyone will be eligible to give a sample at this point. But you have to be enrolled in the registry. And we're also doing it by geographic location. So we want to make sure that we're not getting all blood samples from people in Georgia. We're trying to cover the whole U.S. And again, this is the way the biorepository would work if we get down the road that far and demonstrate that it's feasible. State and metro-based surveillance component. I know that there may be some confusion. Why is ATSDR CDC doing this? And really, this is to help us test the completeness of our registry. So these are 2 different approaches. The National ALS Registry uses existing databases, so the Medicare and the Medicaid and the VA, and self-enrollment. The state-based surveillance is actually active surveillance. So our surveillance partners have gone out and canvassed all neurologists or all practices in a given area, whether it's a state or a metro area, and tried to determine, how many cases does this neurologist see. We'll abstract the cases from that practice. And then at the end of the day, what we're going to do is compare this active approach with the approach that we're using in the registry to see if we're capturing the cases that we expect to capture. And these are the participating metro areas in the states. We're focusing on data from 2009 to 2011. Where are we at with this? The state surveillance is essentially done. The data analysis is concluded. We're in the process of writing up the papers, manuscripts. We sent 2 to peer review already. If you're interested in this, The executive summary is on our portal right now. But I wanted to put this up here because I think this is important to note, that the conclusion was that state surveillance or metro surveillance is extremely time-intensive and resource-intensive. Okay, you've got to have people to go out there, make phone calls after phone call, knocking on physician doors, and it's very costly. You know, some neurologists don't want to participate. And what do you do if a neurologist doesn't want to participate? You know, you've got a data gap right there. So we're doing this primarily to make sure that we're capturing the cases in the National Registry. Also, what we're doing, if you go back and look at these areas, we picked some of these areas strategically just based on the demographics. So, you know, Atlanta, high African American population. Again, this gets back to how does ALS affect different subpopulations. So we're going to be generating papers from these findings as well. So this will include incidence rates in these states, prevalence rates in these metro areas, and so we're very excited to have this data come out. We hope that the state-based data will be published later this year, and we'll certainly work with ALSA or MDA or use social media to let you know when some of these publications are coming out. The metro surveillance is a year behind. It started a year later, so they'll finish up this September, and then we'll start the same process, the data analysis, data cleaning, and we hope to have publications in 2014 for these efforts. This is another one that I really wanted to emphasize. We think that research, as do you, research into ALS, the causes of ALS, it's vital. I mean, to understand this disease, to defeat this disease, we need to know what we're dealing with. So as part of the budget that we got from Congress, we are making research dollars available to researchers to help us determine what are some of the risk factors, what are some appropriate studies that we should be conducting. And the reason we're doing this is if a researcher comes up with a risk factor that hasn't really been talked about in the literature, what we can do is go back and add a risk factor module onto the registry web portal and dig a little deeper to either verify or try to refute that. So it's kind of full circle. So what we've done is we posted an announcement in the Federal Register back in February, closed in March, and you can see some of the topics that CDC ATSDR wanted, epi studies on risk factors. Also, we think it's important to look into the burden that ALS causes on families. We know that it's a tremendous burden on family members. You know, what's the true cost of ALS? I don't know that it's really, we know that. I mean, there have been case reports, but it would be tremendous, or it'd be very powerful information to show, wow, this is not only is it a terrible disease, it's a very expensive disease. And this is the way you get heads to turn, political heads to turn. You know, you show not only how the disease affects someone, but the money, the cost, very powerful information. So we want to know these things as well. We hope to fund multiple studies by this summer, and we're going to make this part of the kind of normal ritual. Every year, we're going to pay our bills with the registry, and then everything that's left over, we're going to push out the door to researchers so that they can dig deeper into what's the cause of this disease. So we're very excited about that. We've also funded some other studies that we think will not only help the general ALS community, but it helps us as well. It helps the National ALS Registry prioritize what we should be looking at. These are some of the examples. I just wanted to mention, we try to be as transparent as possible. I know government is not always transparent, but we want to make sure that people know where we're at. We release preliminary data where we can, but we have posted all of our documents, all of our papers, all of our reports on our web portal. If you're interested, I would encourage you to check that out. I know that some of you have, because people tweet about it, people send us questions about it, and that's fantastic. That's what we want. It's a conversation. A person can add to the conversation. I just want to mention this, that for the chapters, I know there are a lot of chapters here. If you're low on any materials, feel free to come to our website and let us know what you're low on, and we'll ship it out to you free of charge. And if you remember one thing from this presentation, this should be it. Again, I mentioned earlier, we at CDC ATSDR cannot do this alone. Okay, we're not that naive to think we can get this done. This has got to be a collaborative effort. We don't just work with ALSA. We work with MDA. We work with other ALS organizations to really make this thing work and to have this thing take off. And so I would encourage you, if you know a person with ALS who hasn't registered or enrolled in our registry, please talk to them about it. Send 5 emails, send 10 emails, send 100 emails. This is really the way that we get traction here, and this is the way that we bring large numbers into this registry, because the larger the numbers, the better the data will be. So with that, I will take questions, or do you want to do it? Okay. All right. So thank you for allowing me to come out. Always enjoy coming to D.C. and talking to ALSA and stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kevin, and please write your questions down, because we will have time at the end to ask both of our presenters. Our next presenter is Colonel Melissa Forsythe, who not only manages the ALS research program, but also the Gulf War illness program. She is at the Department of Defense, has served 23 years in active duty, and we're happy she's with us today.
Okay. Let me first say thank you very much. I really appreciate the invitation to be here. Thanks. There you go. We'll let the expert do this. This is the second time I've been privileged to address this group, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to be here. So let me just start by saying our office is the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs. Can you hear? No? Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. All right. I've heard that before. All right. So we're part of the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs. The name should tell you a lot about what it is that we do and how we're poised to enter this research arena. And we are part of the Department of Defense. So let me talk to you about a little bit about CDMRP, as we call it. Don't you have a little bit of empathy for our receptionist? The Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs was started a number of years ago, and what we've tried to do is identify and fill niches in research areas that are not currently being exploited. And I use that term intentionally because it is an intentional process. So the funds are added every year at the behest of individuals like yourselves, and that is not a request for lobbying, so please don't take it that way. But that's the way it happens. The funds are not part of the president's budget, so everybody's familiar with the president's budget that goes to the Hill every year. Those are the core programs that the Department of Defense wants to see funded in the next fiscal year and beyond. Those budgets are actually quite huge. Our monies are not in there. Rather, they're added by Congress, again, at the behest of individuals like yourselves, but they don't take away from anything that's already in the president's budget. So if these funds are added for this program and others, it doesn't mean that the Navy's not going to get another battleship or the Air Force is not going to get a new fighter plane. doesn't happen. But Congress has, and Mr. Gibson can tell you a lot more about this than I can, but Congress has the ability to add funds to the Department of Defense appropriation bill every year where they don't have that discretion with other funding bills. So they add these funds, okay? So it doesn't take away from anything else that goes on in the Department of Defense. But they're only for that year. And so every year we try to take a look at the landscape and say, how can we best invest these dollars, because we don't know if next year will happen. So that's a unique factor that we deal with. Our advocates, like yourselves, we have a number of people who are engaged with us. It changes. Those folks change. If you're interested in serving on some of our panels, I can tell you later. I don't have it, I'm sorry, in these slides, but I can get that information, and it can be posted on the ALSA website. But people like yourselves are involved all the way through our process, which is a bit different. Sometimes science seems like a brick wall, doesn't it? It's hard to penetrate. Okay, and we try, again, to fill niches. We also try to fund highly innovative research that might not get funded someplace else. So if you have a really good idea, well, sometimes you have to have, if you're a scientist, you have to have an awful lot of data to convince someone that they should put money into your good idea. And what we try to do is fund ideas that have logic and have reason behind them, but maybe haven't been pursued to that point. So everybody has a great idea from time to time. We like to fund those. Okay, and I'll talk more about the two-tier review later. So it really is a partnership. We can't do this alone. You've heard that already. Nobody can do this alone. And so it starts again with folks like yourselves. You bring passion and a sense of urgency to needing this research to be done. There's a lot of good research being done at other areas of other organizations in the federal government. I'm not saying they're not doing very good research. We work with a lot of those individuals, and they're doing excellent research. What we're trying to do here is not duplicate what they do. That would be meaningless, wouldn't it? It would actually worse. It'd be a waste of all those dollars. So you bring that passion and perspective. You talk to folks in Congress, they respond, they add the monies to the bill. They task the military to manage the funds, and we take that very seriously. That for us is a mission, like any other military mission, and we're going to accomplish that mission. We also feel that we have a vested interest in reflecting how the money is spent back to all of you who have been instrumental in getting the money. So you can go to our website. As Kevin said, we're all trying to be much more transparent these days, but we have, since we were started, we have on our website annual reports. You can go there and find the dollars and cents that were given to us in the appropriations, tracked through the whole process down to the penny. So if you'd like to do that, I welcome you to do that. So we do take it very seriously. And then the research, again, the research community for ALS is very robust. You may know that. There are some wonderful, wonderful researchers in this field, and it's not difficult to attract people to this field. They understand it. They relate to individuals who have ALS. So that's wonderful. We have some challenges, actually, in other fields. Okay. Just to give you an idea, we have today, there were other programs. There's 16 on this slide. ALS is there at the first. We were thankful and humbled to find a $7.5 million appropriation for FY13. As you can see, there's a number of other programs as well. I'm not going to talk to you about them because we don't care about that today. One of the questions we often get is, why the DoD? I mean, it may seem a little strange. Here's two very good reasons. And as a veteran, I certainly take this to heart. That knowing that I could be more at risk for developing a disease like ALS, certainly that makes me feel very kindred spirits with all of you who are here. But our Gulf War veterans are twice as likely to develop ALS, and we don't know why. All right, so let's talk about ALS, the research program itself. This is our vision. And I understand that the ALSA's vision is imagining a world without ALS, right? Okay, I think we're one step before that. We're focused on finding a cure. That's our vision. That's a pretty lofty goal. But here's how we approach that, and we want to get there. And now $7.5 million in research terms is fairly small dollars. I wish I had that in my checking account. You probably do too, but in research, it's a very small amount. That's okay. We're going to make the best of it. And so what we've chosen to focus on is funding preclinical research. Dr. Horton asked you a moment ago how many of you had participated in clinical trials, and that's where everyone wants to be is, at that point in a clinical trial. But the truth is, on the continuum of research, starting with that good idea that I mentioned, you have to do a lot of steps, increasingly arduous work, to demonstrate that what you have is worthy of a clinical trial, it's safe, it's not going to harm anyone, that you have done all the preliminary work. And so part of that is what's called preclinical testing. And we are focused on the preclinical testing in order to, you have to somehow get that pipeline going, and that's where our spot is. So we're trying to develop preclinical testing of new drugs for ALS so that they can go on to clinical trials that would be funded by someone like the National Institute of Neurologic Disease and Stroke or the National Institute on Aging, where their budgets are about 8 to 10 times what ours is. So that's our niche. We find that, and there's not a lot of focus there other than what we're doing. So, excuse me. So let me just talk. It normally starts, of course, with the appropriation, and this isn't coming up right, but that's okay. So over the years since this program was first funded in 2007, you may remember there was a shift in the leadership in Congress in 2007, and a number of our programs were not funded in 2008. This one was one of them. But it has been fortunately funded every year since then. It comes to almost $32 million. You can see, again, I've said it's a very robust scientific community, almost 600 submissions for awards, and we've made almost 23. Those last 3 are getting real close. So, again, we're very thrilled to have the $7.5 million. That's about an 18% increase over last year, which was 6.4. So we hope to make 3 to 4 awards. I'll talk to you about those in a minute. So what have we done with the money? That's always a big question, and I would ask that question too. So these are the awards we've made. You'll notice that they really do add up to 23 on both sides. And again, they're focused on therapies, so new therapies, the development of new drugs. That's exactly what we're focused on. So we have 2 funding mechanisms that we ask scientists to respond to, and these are the 2, and this is how it's come out over the years since 2007. Now, by research topic, you can see that there are actually 13 in real drug development, and I'll talk about a couple of those in a minute. There are some that are doing screens of molecular libraries and other types of screens to find new drugs or new compounds, new molecules that might be worthwhile to pursue as drugs. And there are 6 of those. And then the last little part that says there are 4 projects that are focused on ALS pathophysiology, but honestly they are focused on the way the physiology changes in ways that could lead to new drugs. It's not just a fishing expedition in terms of, what happens with ALS. So it's very much focused on drug development. So here are a couple of these. These are all looking to protect motor neurons, and they're doing it in very different ways. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about why that is because it gets way beyond dinner table conversation. And would probably be a little bit boring, except to folks like me who, like this stuff. Let me just say that the first one, Dr. Barry Carter, you see that his log number is AL07, so he was funded in 2007. He has completed his pre-investigational new drug studies. So that's the IND, investigational new drug, and you're probably familiar with that term, many of you. But that is what you have to do in order to, you have to file an IND, an investigational new drug application with the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, in order to pursue a clinical trial, an actual clinical trial. Lots of testing and work preclinically has to go into that. And you have to understand how a drug is absorbed, how it's metabolized, how it's excreted, how it's dispersed in the body. All of those things. You have to understand the safe doses, the upper and lower limits of safe doses. You have to be able to demonstrate that it's safe. That would be a good thing. And that it's effective and that it has all of those things in different types of animal models. And that's what he's already done. So he's ready for that. He's poised now to go into clinical trials. We won't be able to fund him, but hopefully somebody will because he's right there. He's ready. Dr. Ole Isaacson is looking at vardenafil. Now, vardenafil is a little bit different in that it's already been approved by the FDA for a different use. And so this is considered what's called off-label. You may have heard that term before. Off-label use for a drug is when it's prescribed for something it wasn't originally approved for by the FDA. And so you still have to go back to the FDA and show all of that safety testing and pharmacotoxicology testing and so forth, and resubmit an investigational new drug application. I mean, people are very careful, and understandably so. By the time you get into humans, we want to know all of these things have been done. So he's looking at that, but the fact that it's already FDA approved for other things helps that investigational new drug process move along much more readily. So we're very excited about what he's doing with vardenafil. And then Dr. Silverman is looking at what's now called compound 11. He's had a number of other compounds. There was compound 7, compound 13. I mean, he's been doing this screen trying to hone in on one particular compound, and he thinks he has it now with compound 11. And he's going to be starting to he was funded, as you see there, in 2009, so he's going to be continuing on to demonstrate that this is a therapeutic candidate. So there are 3 since 2007. That's not a real long time in research years. I think research years are even longer than dog years. So we are really thrilled that things are moving. It might not be as rapid as we'd all like, but they are moving along. Now, let me just tell you about a couple of other things, just because they're interesting. Hope you don't mind, so bear with me if this isn't too interesting to y'all, but I think they're kind of different, so I plucked these out. Dr. Nicholas Maragakis, some of you may have heard of Dr. Maragakis. He was funded in 2009 as well. He's looking at the use of what are called induced pluripotent stem cells for transplantation as a therapy for ALS. Now, the good thing about these pluripotent stem cells, and that's hard to say quickly, is that they start as scrapings from your skin. And then in culture, in the lab, with a number of steps, they can be transformed into stem cells, and then they can make any kind of cell. So it gets us past the ethical dilemma about embryonic stem cells, first of all, so we don't have to deal with that anymore. But the great thing is that you're using something that's come from yourself, so you don't have the rejection issues that you would have with something that came from somebody else. And what they can do then is make these into what are called, they make them into glial-restricted precursor cells that then make all 3 different kinds of glia, oligodendrocytes, motor neurons, and, okay, somebody tell me, I'm having a sometime or moment here on astrocytes. All right, those 3 different types of glia cells that are important in the normal functioning of your nervous system. He's looking at the astrocytes because we've learned over the last couple of years that astrocytes are much more important in the functioning of nerve cells than we originally thought. So he can develop these astrocytes in the lab, and the question is, among folks who have familial ALS, sporadic ALS, or are normal controls, are these astrocytes, how are they different? And can they be then, will they survive? Can they be used to protect your own motor neurons so they could be then given back to you in a way to treat your disease? So he's got a lot of steps that he has to go through to do this. But if it works, it would be a treatment that you could give yourself, ultimately. So astrocytes form from your own skin cells. So I hope that sounds as exciting to you as it does to me. All right, the other one is Raymond Grill, and he had a new idea in 2011. We were just looking at this recently. He's using what are called nanovectors. Please don't ask me to explain how small nanovectors are, but I know that the head of a pin doesn't begin to, there are millions and billions of them on the head of a pin. Tiny, tiny microscopic little organisms that he's combining with an antioxidant or anti-inflammatory agent to then target the delivery of riluzole, Rilotec, in a much more enhanced way. So, riluzole does work, but we need it to work better. So that's what he's trying to do. So then you can target the delivery of this with this nanovector combined with an antioxidant and riluzole and deliver it right into the central nervous system. So that's what he's trying to work on. And if he's successful, it may establish a whole new class of combination therapies to treat ALS. All right, these are the 2012 awards. These are just being made, as I said a minute ago, because, of course, FY12, 2012, 2013 was a little bit different in terms of budget activity. I'm sure I don't need to tell you all about that. These are the three that were funded, so we're very excited about them. Because they have not been awarded, I can't tell you really much about them at this time, but when they're awarded, they will appear on our website. That you can look through them. You'll see their abstracts, how much money they were funded with, and what they're going to do with it. So, all right. So, I said a minute ago that every year it starts with a congressional appropriation, and that is true in terms of things actually moving along. But if you notice at the top of this slide, the congressional appropriation didn't come through till last month. So we had to start a little sooner than that, because otherwise we'd be way behind the power curve. So we sat down at the beginning of the calendar year with our group. You see there the integration panel. They're our group of expert scientists and clinicians and advocates who every year sit down with us and we say, okay, if we get money, what is the best way to invest it this year, not knowing if we'll get anything else. So we asked that panel to convene, and they did that in January. We played a couple of what-if scenarios, and if we get this much funding, what should we do? If we get this much funding, what should we do? And so we were ready when April came around. So some of you may have noticed, I know the Henry Jackson Foundation noticed, that we released those funding mechanisms, those calls for proposals on Monday of this week. So we got them out as quickly as we could. So the scientific community should know that they're out there. We're going to ask them to send us proposals for new research to fund. They will come in September. We will have the first of the 2 levels of review that I mentioned early on, peer review. That's a scientific review. Peers, or scientific peers, sit down and they evaluate the science of the applications that come in. And then we have a second level review where those folks on that integration panel come back and they take a look at those applications. Now, they don't get to see the whole application. They only get to see the critique that the first reviewers do, the peer reviewers. The peer reviewers write a critique, they give the application a score, and they write that up. That and the abstracts are what the second level programmatic reviewers get to see. So they have tough decisions to make in terms of what should be funded, recommended for funding. They do a great job. Then we have a list of those we recommend that are recommended for funding. We take that to our commanding general, he approves it, and then we start negotiating with the scientists to actually pin down the amounts of the awards. And then we execute those awards. We don't execute the scientists, really. But during the execution of these awards, the life of the award, that was a little bit militaristic, the execution, but that's how we think of it. While the awards are going on, the research is being done, we monitor the progress of those awards during their lifetime, and then we follow them afterwards to see if anything came out of what was funded by the program. So we have an ongoing program evaluation effort, which is a lot of fun too. So $7.5 million, you may wonder what's going to happen with those dollars. Okay. We're going to have approximately 75%, ooh, that was a bad one, 75% of those funds will be available for research. Okay. And as Mr. Gibson said, please don't ask me to explain where that first line of withhold money is going. Okay, I can't. I can tell you our management costs are pretty small. We only have about 45 people in our office. The rest of our work is done by contractors. So we keep it pretty lean, and they say pretty mean. All right, so $5.63 million for research, and how are we going to do that? Okay, the way we're going to approach this again is to look for new therapies to develop. And we have 2 funding mechanisms. We'll ask the scientists to respond to one or both, but not with the same project. A therapeutic development award, which you can see is a large award, $1.5 million, 3 years, and we hope to make 1 to 2 awards. The IDEA award is a little bit different. Smaller award, you can see, $400,000, 2 years, and 1 to 2 of those. Now, those don't include the indirect costs that the organizations tack on. So the universities have to keep the lights on and the water flowing and the sewer pumping and all that. So they add what are called indirect costs onto the top of that. It's normally about 60% more onto that. So that's the award the university will get. So a single therapeutic development award on average is about $2.4 million to the institution. And then of that, the investigator gets about 1.5 million or whatever it is we've negotiated with them. Okay. So the Therapeutic Development Award, again, we're talking about preclinical assessment of new drugs, and for them to generate the data, they would need to go on to clinical trials. So in that pipeline of research, from a good idea to a full-blown clinical trial, they're getting quite a far way down that stream. Okay, they're not at the good idea stage any longer. And for $1.5 million, you would expect them to be a little bit more further downstream. Okay, they have to have that preliminary data. They have to be able to tell us what it's about. Now, the IDEA Award, in contrast, is to promote new ideas. It's just what it says. And so we don't ask the investigators to come in with preliminary data in hand. That would defeat the purpose. But tell us what your new idea is. Tell us what the logic is behind us. Look at the literature, what's already been done. Make a case for what you want to study. And then they have to be able to show that it will have a high impact if funded. Now, sometimes there's a risk to doing these. Sometimes they don't work out. And that's true. I mean, to the best of our abilities, we determine whether or not something will be successful, but really, truly, does anybody ever know in terms of research? Not really. But $400,000 is not a huge sum, and we're willing to let investigators move on, hoping that even if it's not successful, we will learn something in the process, and we'll know not to do some things again. So, again, investigators at all levels, as long as they're independent, 2 years, and preliminary data is not required. Okay, so this is how they compare, the two. They're both focused on therapies, on development of new drugs. So you see that in the center, the search for candidate therapeutics. But the one on the left, the Therapeutic Development Award, that's the big award. They have to have preliminary data. It has to be real preclinical testing, and they have to have a product at the end of it. The Therapeutic Idea Award, they have to have preliminary data at the end of it, and they may not necessarily have a drug that they can identify. These are the folks on that integration panel that I spoke to you about. These folks do rotate every so often as well. We don't have standing panels. Our peer reviewers are not standing panels either. We rotate them as well. We always like to get new blood into the system. But I think you probably recognize the first name on that list. And just to point out, Ellen Phillips. Ellen, where are you? Yes. And let me just point out, too, that Dr. Maragakis is on the panel. He was not on the panel when he was funded. I just need to tell you that. That would be a horrible conflict of interest, wouldn't it? And actually, it's something of an impediment for the scientists who agreed to be on the panel, because neither they nor anyone in their lab can submit for funding during the time they're on the panel. It would be, it would look like they had gotten a very unfair advantage. So the scientists are doing it because this is what they love, and so I just needed you to know that, okay? And so you can see also we have the Department of Veterans Affairs represented, the National Institute of Neuroscience, Disease, and Stroke. Dr. Gubitz has been with us now for a couple of years. She's been wonderful. Mr. Jim Humay is from the ALS Hope Foundation, and then a couple of scientists here. Our major from the Air Force is actually a molecular geneticist, and Dr. Maragakis, Ellen, and Dr. Trainer, who's from the National Institute on Aging. So the good thing about engaging these folks from other funding organizations is that then we know what's being funded elsewhere. And even though they're not focused on preclinical testing, the National Institute of Neurologic Disease and Stroke doesn't fund this preclinical research that I've talked to you about. And so our portfolios are very complementary, because then they can take those studies on and fund them on larger clinical trials. And same with the National Institute on Aging. So it's wonderful to know, and I want you all to know that too, that we take it very seriously that there's no duplication of effort. So we're not going to fund someone who's funded for the same thing somewhere else. And we do make every effort to make sure that that doesn't happen, and having these individuals engaged is a big step towards doing that. 10 years ago, people didn't talk like this, and unfortunately, in across federal agencies very well. We didn't play in the sandbox very nice sometimes. So it's a wonderful group, and they've been tremendous in getting us moving forward. So our goal, as always, is to find and fund the best research that's out there that we can. And like you, we'd like to imagine a world without ALS. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Colonel Forsythe. Now, I believe we have some microphones in the room. There's one right there, one over here. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Please speak in the microphone so our colleagues who are watching online can also hear.
Hello, my name is George Bauer, and this question is for Kevin. He talked about a very promising expansion of biorepository. Can you tell us more about what will be done with those samples as opposed to just sitting in the freezer? Are there plans to actually do something?
So it's a good question. Short answer is we would make them available to scientists and researchers who study ALS. Obviously, there would be a screening process. We wouldn't just turn them over to anybody. They would have to submit an application. But this is what the pilot is doing right now, is helping us flesh these things out. How do we make these samples available? What's the screening process? Where are they going to be stored? How are they going to be distributed to scientists? Is there going to be a charge? So all these things are being looked at right now, but the short answer is it's available for researchers.
Okay, thank you. Question on this side of the room? Here?
My name is Jerry Fouts. I come from Missouri. The presentation by the National Registry that showed cyanobacteria almost made me do cartwheels across here. So my question is to the Department of Defense. I'm familiar with the Institute for Ethnomedicine, and they've been studying ALS in Guam since the late 90s. Their contention is cyanobacteria that causes BMAA. In 2003, they published a letter saying that there was cyanobacteria in the Gulf region during the Gulf War. The Department of Defense immediately published a letter denying any connection between cyanobacteria and BMA causing ALS. Of course, this was during the period when DOD was denying everything. But later on then, the Journal of American Medical Association in 2005 wrote an article that this definitely needed to be looked at. They also repeated that article in 2009. So the question is DOD going to look at cyanobacteria and change their opinion of somewhat?
Sir, I think that actually that question is more relevant to our Gulf War illness research program. Obviously, I would say if someone wanted to submit a research application with that premise, it would certainly be reviewed just like all the others. We don't have a process that cuts things off at the beginning. So I can't speak, again, as Mr. Gibson said, for the Department of Defense, but I can tell you that we would certainly accept research applications that conform to the funding announcements.
And perhaps, sir, tomorrow we can connect you with our science director, too, who might have some background that she can talk more about that.
Thank you.
Okay,
Can I just say something?
Mm-hmm, sure.
Cyanobacteria is something that CDC we're interested in as well. And if you actually go and look at the announcement, funding announcement, we specifically listed cyanobacteria. So we're hoping to get some study proposals for cyanobacteria. So, for whatever that's worth.
Okay. Question over here?
This is my name's Rick Jones. As the CDC or the medical community, have a recommendation on whether or not us with ALS should be organ donors upon our death.
Whether a person with ALS should be an organ donor?
Right. Have they come out with anything official to the medical community?
Well, you know, I don't know how to answer that. I don't think that CDC has come out with anything other than, you know, it's strictly a personal preference. I mean, I can give you my viewpoint, but it's not the official CDC viewpoint. I don't know if DOD...
Realize that, but with the, with the HIPAA laws, when you make an organ, if you're an organ donor, that's not public knowledge to that surgeon or the autopsy or whatever's going on. So that it's going to put it back on us individuals as to getting medical advice, even if it's on the side, as to what should we be thinking about. Okay, something to think about then, thanks.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The VA.
For the biorepository for ALS for the National Registry, we will be collecting postmortem specimens specific for ALS research. But again, we're in the pilot phase right now. Once we get that fleshed out, that'll be a possibility there.
And the VA, I know, has a very sophisticated system that collects that as well. So, okay. Question over here?
Kevin, this is from Ed and Shirley Smelsley. We're in Cincinnati, Ohio. Back to the collection, you talked about home acquisition of samples. Can you explain a little bit more the process of doing that? I guess it gets back to specifically the integrity of the collection of that sample, and how do you do it, and then how do you get engaged in it? How do you get involved?
That's for me. Again, we're not there yet. Let me say this: at CDC or at ATSDR, we know quite a bit about registries, putting together registries. We help do the World Trade Center registry. We've got some asbestos registries. Biorepositories are something new for us, or at least my branch. And this is why we have hired an outside group in connection with a lot of these individuals that Melissa listed up here to give us feedback on how do we do this? What about the integrity of the samples? How do we store them? Those types of questions. We don't have the answers right now, but this is what the pilot phase is about, and this is going to help us answer these types of questions. I know that's not really a good answer, but we're early in the process right now. The pilot phase, so we funded, this started in 2011 and it'll finish up 2015. So I know that that's far out if you're a person with ALS, but this is something that we can't just rush right into, and we're talking about covering the entire U.S. And if you think about it, if we make tissue part of this, or even donating brains, there's a big logistical challenge there. How do you actually, if you're on the West Coast, someone dies of ALS on the East Coast, you got to make sure that you're there within a certain amount of hours. And so there's a lot of logistical challenges there, but this is what we're doing right now in the pilot phase. So I can just say stay tuned. We're trying to update our website. Again, this gets back to transparency, letting you know. I believe there's our first report of the biorepository is on our website right now, and it may be of interest to you. So you can check that out.
Okay. Question back here? I'm sorry. None over here?
Right here.
Waiting for the mic.
Is the gentleman here? Yeah.
This question is for Kevin. If you are a registered or organ donor, would that be automatic to give you the bio samples that you need? Or is this something totally separate?
Totally different system. You know,
Are you connected into that?
no, and I don't know if there's any way we could do that. But if you're interested in donating a postmortem specimen, as part of this protocol, we're going to have Deaners or people who actually go out and establish a close working relationship with the family member, the patient, and there'll be a lot of paperwork, or not a lot, but there'll be paperwork to fill out so that it's clear that if you're going to donate tissue or skin or brain, it would come to the National ALS Registry or biorepository. But no, just because you've checked it on your driver's license that you're an organ donor, no. And that's an issue that we have to look at, and it's being looked at as well.
That is also something that they have with the military hospital. The VA has a copy of my record
Okay.
saying that I would be an organ donor. So.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
good. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
A question over here?
Yes, I'm Al Eckhart from Gulfport, Mississippi. I know you said you were aware already of other biorepositories. I'm involved with the Boston VA biorepository. Are you going to be linking up with them and sharing information? See, they've already come out and gotten samples from me, and they've already signed me up to, give my brain and spinal cord. They've given me a number to call. Well, not me, but we have a number to call, if I pass away, for them to come and collect that.
Yep.
So have you been linking with them to find out how they've done it? Are you going to be sharing information? Or
It's a great question. And it gets back to leveraging resources, and especially in this economic climate. We have to use what's already demonstrated that's tried and true. VA's got a system where they collect brains and certain biospecimens. So we've been talking with them, consulting with them. I believe also Boston University has been consulted as well. So we're not trying to step on anyone's toes, but we're seeing what's out there. Can we fill any gaps? And can we use what's already there? But short answer is yes.
Okay, thank you. Question over here?
This question is for Kevin. You mentioned that during the data gathering that there are potentially neurologists who don't want to participate or who won't participate. Is there a general reason as to why they won't?
And I don't want to be careful not to make that generalization that, but smaller practices, they don't have the time, they don't have the resources. We're asking people to go in and abstract, do chart abstractions. Now, again, this is not for the National ALS Registry. This is for the state and metro part that helps us test the completeness. But what we found is generally money turns the situation around, and people come around and say, yeah, come on in, we'll do this for you. But a wide variety of different reasons: time, resources, personnel they don't have, you name it.
Okay, question over here.
Yes, my name is Karen Shalkrotz from Lewis Center, Ohio. My question is for Kevin. Kevin, is interesting in regards to the data that you shared with us today, but you didn't give any web stats. So do you have any stats of the ALS patients that have completed all your surveys to where they are today?
Yeah, I didn't put it up here, but what we know is about a little over half of the patients enrolled in the registry have taken the first survey. So if you really look at that percentage. That's really a good percentage in terms of federal surveys, people completing federal surveys in general. Can it be better? Yes. And so we really need to do a full court press. Again, we can't do it, but collaboratively, we can reach out to people and make sure that they even know about the registry and that risk factor modules are part of the registry. So I would just say that, you know, we're making progress, but we really need to step up our marketing, not only CDC, ATSCR, but collectively.
My husband is 45 and has ALS and couldn't be with me today, but we did the registry, but I had no idea that you could go to different steps. So personally, just as a caregiver and an advocate, I had no idea that you wanted, you know, more follow-up, et cetera.
Right, okay.
So even if the website could have something,
Yep.
when you leave, you know, please check back in 3 months and tell us, you know, fill out the following
Right.
surveys, or something that gives the caregiver who's new to the process a little alert or
Right.
something.
I totally agree. We will be doing auto-generated emails to people in the registry when new risk factor modules come online. I mean, you know, a person with ALS, you want to live your life. I don't want you coming checking our registry every day, you know. So anything we can do to make it easier for people, whether it's an auto-generated email, whether it's getting, you know, a mailing from ALSA about the registry, giving latest information, that's what we're trying to do. But I appreciate your feedback.
Yeah, I appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thanks. A question over here?
Steve, this isn't even a question. Where the gentleman was asking about checking off in the back of the your driver's license. What I would recommend, and I have 30 years of experience in probate law, write a will and specify directly that that's where you would like it to go to. It would then fall back onto your executor or executrix to make sure, or whoever handles the estate, to make sure that that gets to the right place. Checking it off on a license, on the back of a driver's license, you would probably, it just would go to, you know, the donator, or, you know, whoever the state-funded donation society is.
Okay, great, thank you. Question over here?
Yes, I'm Stephen Ladner. I live in South Mississippi. How long has the database been put in place, and how far down the road do you think it is? My first question.
I didn't see your question.
How long has the database been put in place?
Oh, the registry? The registry was launched in October of 2010, and it's going full steam now, and we don't, you know, unless Congress pulls funds, we're going to keep going. And so, yeah, it's been in existence for a couple of years. We're about to turn the corner. I think by the end of this calendar year, beginning of next calendar year, so January, February, March, we'll have our first complete data set. One of the things that I didn't go into a lot of detail on is the National Administrative Database part. We are using data from other federal agencies, and so we can only move as quickly as we get that data. And it's not that they're sitting on the data, but it takes them a while to compile the data. There's a lag with Medicare and Medicaid. But we're about to turn the corner, and I think 2013, into 2013, 2014 is going to be a big year for the National ALS Registry. And from that point on, once we get into a pattern, we'll start releasing new data sets every year, much like a cancer registry does.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Is there another question?
I have one more question.
Okay.
Talking about the research and doing it with lab rats and stuff like that to make sure that that it's safe to take. And most people with ALS don't, you know, have that time to be tested in rats and stuff. And my question is, the first heart transplant, how many rats did they test it in before they did it?
Actually, I good question. But Actually, because devices have to go through the FDA as well. It's called an investigational device. The process is very similar. So actually, I believe the artificial heart was tested in pigs, not rats. Well, rats early on. But at any rate, it's just necessary to show in increasingly complex systems of we can't, before we go into humans, that of beings, if you will, that animal models, that the drug is safe and that it works the way you think it's going to work, it does what you think it's going to do. So these are coming along pretty quickly. I know it's not as fast, as I said, as everyone would like, but we can only do things so fast without being unsafe.
Yeah, well, some hearts don't work either. I mean, they don't make it through it, but they try it anyway.
And we've got 2 sessions on Friday with the FDA as well as clinical trial sessions. Maybe we can talk more about that then. Is there one last question before we... Here? Okay.
Oh, yes, Kevin, since I'm a veteran, you would have probably already gotten my information from the VA, but are they giving you my name or just a number? And should I still go register with the National Registry, even though the VA, you're getting information from them?
That's a great question. The answer is yes. You may be in the VA system, and we may get your data, but the important part of coming to the registry, the website, is you can take those risk factor modules. So that's giving us additional data that we really need. Now, intuitively you might think, well, a person's going to be counted twice.
That's what I was thinking.
But we have Social Security numbers that we can match on, and we can shake out the duplicates and make sure that we're only counting a person one time.
Okay, thanks.
But that's a great question. Mm-hmm. So just because you think you're in the National Administrative Database, mm-hmm. we still want you to come and enroll in the National Registry.
Great. Well, thank you all. We're going to take a quick break. So there'll be refreshments outside, and then come back in the room for our prep for the Hill. Thank you, Kevin and Melissa.